It began with a slow silence that crept across the land, a stillness that swallowed entire forests and rivers. The earth itself seemed to shiver as temperatures fell lower than anything the planet had known for millennia. Winds carried sharp shards of frost across the plains, stripping trees bare and burying the bones of fallen animals beneath growing sheets of white. The sun, pale and distant, hung in the sky like a memory fading into the frozen haze. This was not just winter, it was an age of ice, and for those who lived upon this planet, it felt like the end of the world. In this hostile landscape, survival was not a matter of strength but of endurance. Glaciers advanced slowly but relentlessly, carving valleys and crushing anything in their path. Each passing year drew the boundary between life and death closer. The land that once offered fruit, green grass, and warmth became a wasteland of snow and silence. The animals that survived grew thick coats, heavy with frost, and migrated endlessly in search of whatever scraps of vegetation still clung to life. For early humans, fragile, fireless, and few, the Ice Age was a test of what unlike any before. Imagine small bands of hunter-gatherers moving through endless white horizons, their footprints vanishing moments after being made. There was no guarantee of shelter, no promise of safety. A misstep could mean frostbite, starvation, or being lost forever in a blizzard that erased everything from sight. Nights were especially cruel. The cold was not just a sensation. It was a presence seeping through skin and bone, whispering that warmth might never return. When the sun dipped below the horizon, darkness became absolute. Even the stars seemed frozen, distant pinpricks of unreachable fire. The world had changed so drastically that even breathing felt like defiance. The air stung the lungs, and every breath left a small ghost of vapor behind, as if life itself struggled to be seen in the vast stillness. The first humans looked upon this frozen world with a kind of awe and terror. They had no myths to explain it yet, no gods to curse or pray to, only the knowledge that each dawn could be their last. They moved cautiously, observing the patterns of animals, the behavior of the winds, the way the snow carried scent and sound. Every detail mattered. A faint trail could mean food or death. Yet, even in this merciless age, life found ways to persist. In the midst of the white desolation, there were valleys where warmth clung to the earth like a secret. Hot springs steamed through cracks in the ice, offering momentary refuge. Caves became sanctuaries, dark wombs of stone where the air was still and the ground dry. Within these natural shelters, small groups huddled together for warmth. They pressed their bodies close, wrapping themselves in animal hides, listening to the groans of glaciers outside like distant thunder. The contrast between the freezing world beyond and the fragile circle of warmth inside these caves defined what it meant to be human, to fight back, however small the flame. Time lost meaning in this world of perpetual winter. The cycles of day and night blurred beneath the snow clouds. Hunters ventured farther each week, tracking mammoths, woolly rhinoceroses, and giant deer across miles of ice. Every hunt was a gamble between life and death. If they succeeded, the tribe would eat for days. If they failed, starvation waited. The bones of animals became tools, their hides became clothing, and their meat became the difference between survival and extinction. Nothing was wasted because everything cost something. But perhaps the most haunting part of those days was the silence. The Ice Age was not filled with noise, but with absence. Forests no longer whispered. Rivers no longer roared. Even the wind, for all its fury, carried a strange emptiness. It was in this silence that early humans learned to listen, to the cracking of ice beneath their feet, to the soft breathing of their companions in the dark, to the faint cry of a distant creature echoing through snow. It was in this quiet that the mind awakened. The cold stripped away distraction and left only awareness, the awareness of existence, of fragility, of the eternal question of why life fought so hard to endure. Through this struggle, something began to awaken within humanity. They began to see patterns in the chaos, to sense rhythms in the seasons, to read meaning in the sky and the snow. The harshness of the Ice Age became their teacher. It forced innovation, cooperation, and foresight. They learned that survival was not just physical strength, but memory, knowing where to find shelter, when to move, and how to read the language of the frozen earth. Every choice mattered. Every action echoed through the small circle of the living. And so, amid the endless frost, the first flicker of human resilience was born. These were not yet civilizations or kingdoms, not yet storytellers or builders, but seeds of all that would come. Their hearts beat slowly beneath layers of fur and skin, each heartbeat a defiance against extinction. When the world turned to ice, humanity could have perished. But instead, they adapted, watched, and waited. The cold sculpted them into thinkers, survivors, and dreamers long before they lit their first fires. The Ice Age did not simply test them, it forged them. It was the crucible that transformed frightened creatures into the architects of tomorrow. For within the frost and silence, something extraordinary happened. Humanity learned to endure the impossible. And though the world was frozen, within those fragile bodies burned the faint, unyielding spark of warmth that would one day conquer even the coldest night. There was a time when darkness ruled the earth completely. The cold winds howled like beasts across the plains, and shadows stretched endlessly between trees glazed with ice. For early humans, the fall of night was not a time of rest. It was a curtain of terror. Every sound carried meaning. The distant growl of a predator, the crack of freezing branches, the faint breath of something unseen. They lived within this eternal twilight, clutching one another for warmth, their hearts pounding as the cold bit deeper into their bones. It was in these long, merciless nights that the idea of fire, the mysterious glow that could hold back darkness, began to feel like salvation itself. At first, fire was a miracle witness from afar. Lightning would strike the dry edges of forests, setting the world ablaze in a storm of orange and gold. Cavemen watched from the shadows as the flames devoured trees, danced over the land, and filled the sky with smoke and ash. They didn't yet understand it. They feared it. To them, fire was alive, wild, untamed, dangerous. It could destroy as easily as it could save. But there was something magnetic about it, something deeply human in the way they couldn't look away. The warmth it radiated reached them through the wind, the light reflected in their wide eyes, and the memory of it stayed long after the flames died out. Fire was the first thing in nature that felt both divine and reachable. The earliest attempts to harness it were clumsy, desperate, and filled with awe. Some tribes learned to preserve fire from lightning-scorched trees, guarding the embers as if they were sacred relics. They would carry burning sticks wrapped in bark from place to place, feeding the glow with dry moss and animal dung. Those who held the fire were treated with reverence, perhaps even fear. If it went out, it wasn't just the loss of warmth, it was the loss of hope. Over time, these embers became the beating heart of every group. The fire pit wasn't simply a place to cook. It was a symbol of life itself. Around it, the tribe gathered to plan, to eat, to heal, to remember. It was the first center of human community. But to truly understand why fire became sacred, we must look beyond survival. Fire changed the way early humans thought, felt, and imagined. In its glow, the night transformed. The shadows no longer hid predators. They created stories. The flames flickered against cave walls, casting shapes that turned into animals, spirits, and ancestors. Fire gave birth to myth. It gave the human mind a mirror in which to see itself. In the silence before lighting it, there was always tension, reverence, almost ritual. That silence was the recognition of its power, the acknowledgement that they were about to summon something far greater than themselves. To sit before a fire in the Ice Age was to experience both fear and safety at once. The heat offered comfort, but its glow also revealed the fragile faces of those who depended on it. Every spark, Every pop of burning wood was a reminder that warmth came at a cost. They had to venture into the frozen wilderness to gather fuel, risk their lives to feed the flame. And when the fire began to fade, panic would set in. For without it, the cold would creep back, slowly claiming everything. In that world, fire was not a luxury. It was breath, heartbeat, and light combined. As humans learned to control it, they began to shape their existence around it. The fire dictated when to hunt, when to rest, when to tell stories. It stretched the day into night, giving them hours to think, to create, to dream. Archaeologists have found charred bones, blackened hearths, and soot-stained cave ceilings that tell the same story across continents. Wherever early humans went, fire followed. It became their signature, their mark upon the earth. Animals had strength, speed, and claws, but humans had fire. It was the great equalizer, the invisible weapon that made the smallest tribe capable of surviving against the harshest odds. In a world of ice, fire was warmth. But in a world of fear, it was courage. It illuminated more than caves. It illuminated thought. Around the flames, early humans began to share memory. They mimed hunts, passed down lessons, sang soft sounds that would one day become words. The firelight turned strangers into families, wanderers into tribes, and tribes into civilizations waiting to be born. Every spark that rose into the air was a fragment of human spirit, brief, bright, and fragile, yet defiant against the surrounding cold. It is said that before lighting the fire, cavemen would often sit in complete silence. This silence was not hesitation, it was reverence. They understood, even without language, that this act meant summoning life itself. In that quiet moment, before stone struck stone, they were between worlds, between darkness and light, between death and survival. The crack of flint against flint was the sound of defiance. When the first tiny ember appeared, glowing faintly in the dry grass, every breath became sacred. They leaned close, cupping the flame, whispering to it as if it were newborn. And when it finally caught, when the flames leapt upward, there was a collective exhale, a sound of relief that echoed through generations. Over time, fire transformed more than their nights. It reshaped their destiny. It allowed them to cook food, unlocking more nutrition and energy. It hardened wooden spears into weapons. It scared away beasts that once stalked them in the dark. It even altered their bodies, smaller teeth, stronger brains, longer lives. Fire changed evolution itself. But perhaps its greatest gift was psychological. The flame became a symbol of control in a world ruled by chaos. It was the first thing humans could truly command, and in mastering it, they learned to master themselves. As centuries passed, fire became woven into belief and ritual. Some tribes believed the fire was a spirit, something that must never be disrespected. Others saw it as a gift from the heavens, a piece of the sun brought down to earth. They began to use it in ceremonies, lighting torches before hunts or burning herbs to ward off unseen forces. The fire pit was no longer just a tool. It was an altar. It was the first sacred space humankind ever built. Even today, thousands of years later, that instinct remains. We gather around campfires, candles, and hearths with the same silent awe our ancestors felt. The dance of the flames still calms us, connects us, reminds us that warmth was once our greatest treasure. Somewhere deep in our DNA, we still remember those nights when the cold pressed close, and a small circle of firelight was all that stood between life and extinction. The discovery of fire marked the moment humanity stopped merely enduring the world and began to shape it. It turned us from victims of nature into its partners, even its rivals. Every civilization that rose afterward, every city, every forge, every lamp and lantern, all are echoes of that first sacred flame. Fire became more than a survival tool. It became the heartbeat of our species. In that ancient silence, before the first spark, humans were just creatures among many. But when the fire lit, when the night turned gold and shadows danced, humanity, was born. In the endless white expanse of the Ice Age, hunger was more than a feeling. It was a constant companion, stalking every step, whispering in every gust of frozen wind. Food was scarce, unpredictable, and often dangerous to obtain. Early humans could not rely on the lush forests or abundant rivers of warmer times. Every meal had to be earned, negotiated, and fought for. The landscape itself had turned against them. Frozen rivers blocked migration routes, snow buried plants beneath impenetrable layers, and ice-covered plains stretched endlessly, seemingly devoid of life. Yet within this desolate world, the ingenuity of the human mind began to take shape, driven by necessity and the unrelenting gnaw of hunger. The diets of these early people were dictated by survival. Hunting large herbivores such as mammoths, woolly rhinoceroses, and reindeer became essential. These creatures were massive, often far stronger than the humans who pursued them. A single kill could feed a small tribe for weeks, providing not just meat, but fat, hides, and bones for tools. But hunting was never straightforward. Predators, weather, and the sheer unpredictability of the herd all made each expedition a perilous gamble. Hunters had to strategize, communicate without words, and move in perfect synchrony. They studied migration patterns, observed the seasons, and learned the intimate behaviors of their prey. Every hunt was a masterclass in patience, observation, and the ability to anticipate life and death simultaneously. But the Ice Age diet was not exclusively about hunting. Scavenging became an equally vital skill. Humans followed predators, waiting for them to exhaust a kill before carefully taking what remained. Bones were cracked for marrow, a nutrient-dense substance that provided essential energy during the harshest months. Plants, though scarce, were not ignored. Early humans learned to recognize edible roots, frozen berries, and winter-hardy vegetation. Every morsel mattered. Even insects, grubs, and the occasional small bird contributed to survival. What seems unpalatable to modern eyes was often the difference between life and death for those living in a world ruled by frost and scarcity. The struggle for nourishment also shaped the human body and mind. Scarcity demanded efficiency. Our ancestors developed smaller teeth and stronger jaws, capable of grinding tough plant matter and chewing frozen meat. Their digestive systems adapted to absorb more nutrients from protein and fat, essential in a land with few carbohydrates. Energy became precious, leading to more deliberate, calculated movements. Every step, every throw of a spear, every decision about whether to follow a herd or conserve strength was governed by the invisible weight of hunger. Hunger was both teacher and tyrant, shaping anatomy, behavior, and cognition. Hunting and gathering also shaped social structures. Tribes had to collaborate, share responsibilities, and communicate with precision. A failed hunt meant starvation, and survival depended on the ability to work together. Cooperation became ingrained, and with it, the foundations of human empathy and community were laid. Hunters developed unspoken signals, silent agreements, and trust born of mutual dependence. The tribe became an extended organism, each member vital to the success of the whole. Firelight, strategic hiding, and coordinated attacks were the practical tools, but trust, planning, and knowledge of the landscape were the invisible weapons that ensured survival. The emotional landscape of hunger was equally complex. The cold gnawed not just at bodies, but at minds. Starvation induced fear, desperation, and anxiety. Yet it also sparked creativity. The first humans experimented with new hunting tools, traps, and weapons. They observed animal behavior to improve their chances. They stored surplus food in primitive caches, sometimes burying meat in ice to preserve it for days. Hunger became a driving force for invention, a subtle teacher pushing early humans toward solutions that would one day define civilization. Nutrition, or the lack of it, also influenced reproductive strategies. Tribes had to consider the survival of children in conditions that could easily claim young lives. Those who could efficiently find and share food had better success in raising offspring. This created evolutionary pressures. intelligence, problem-solving ability, and social cooperation were rewarded, while recklessness or isolation could be fatal. The Ice Age acted as a selective force, refining the traits that would define humanity for millennia to come. Food was also intertwined with ritual and emotion. The act of a kill was both a practical necessity and a profound moment. Meat was rarely consumed immediately. Portions were shared, honored, and often accompanied by gestures that seemed to foreshadow later spiritual or cultural practices. The hunt became a defining ritual, linking life, death, and the community. Even small victories, capturing a rabbit, cracking open marrow-rich bones, were celebrated quietly, with gestures, murmurs, and shared satisfaction around the fire. In a world where survival was never guaranteed, each meal was a miracle, and each shared morsel was a bond of trust. The Ice Age diet also influenced migration and territorial behavior. Tribes followed the movements of prey across frozen landscapes, sometimes over hundreds of miles. Seasonal shifts determined when to hunt certain animals, when to move closer to rivers or valleys, and when to retreat to caves or other shelters. Food scarcity often forced conflicts between groups, as territories overlapped and resources became contested. Survival was thus inseparable from knowledge of the environment, adaptability, and diplomacy. Hunger was both teacher and mediator, shaping social norms, territorial awareness, and the intricate dance of cooperation and competition. Anthropological evidence supports this intimate connection between diet and evolution. Fossilized bones, stone tools, and remnants of charred meat show that early humans were highly skilled hunters and scavengers, adapting their diets to even the most extreme conditions. They were opportunistic yet strategic, taking advantage of seasonal abundance, storing food when possible, and minimizing waste. Every morsel contributed to survival. Every act of ingenuity was recorded in the human genome, and every hardship honed the instincts that would carry humanity through millennia. Even within the bleakness of starvation, humans displayed remarkable resilience. They were capable of astonishing feats, dragging massive carcasses over frozen plains, enduring blizzards while tracking prey, and surviving weeks with little nourishment. Hunger sharpened the senses. Vision, hearing, and smell became acute tools for detecting food and danger alike. The mind, driven by necessity, became a calculating machine, weighing risk and reward, evaluating the environment with precision. In the crucible of scarcity, humans did not merely survive. They adapted, learned, and evolved. In the end, the cold hunger of the Ice Age was more than a physical challenge. It was a crucible for humanity. It shaped bodies, brains, and societies. It created the need for fire, for tools, for cooperation, and for foresight. It forged empathy and ingenuity in equal measure. And as the sun broke across the frozen horizon each morning, early humans understood that survival was not a matter of luck but of strategy, observation, and courage. Hunger, relentless and unyielding, became a teacher of life, molding the first true architects of human destiny. Through the lens of diet and survival, we see that the struggle against starvation was not just about the next meal. It was about shaping a species capable of thinking, planning, and enduring. Every hunt, every scavenged bone, every root discovered beneath snow was a step toward mastery over a hostile world. The Ice Age, with all its cruelty and frost, revealed the extraordinary adaptability of humans. Hunger was no mere absence. It was the spark that ignited the evolutionary flame, guiding humanity toward intelligence, culture, and ultimately, the ability to endure anything the world could throw at them. In a world where the wind cut like knives and snow blanketed every surface, shelter was far more than a convenience. It was the difference between life and death. Early humans could not afford the luxury of comfort. Every roof, every wall, every hiding place was a calculated defense against the relentless cold. The Ice Age was not just a season. It was a predator in its own right, invisible yet omnipresent. Without protection, Hypothermia could strike within minutes, and predators like wolves or saber-toothed cats prowled the frozen plains, waiting for weakness. Survival demanded ingenuity, adaptability, and a deep understanding of the materials nature provided. Caves were often the first choice for refuge. Their natural stone walls provided insulation against wind and snow, and their interiors remained relatively stable in temperature. Within these dark recesses, humans discovered more than safety. They found a space to organize their lives. They dragged animal hides across the stone floors, layered bones to create rudimentary beds, and even arranged rocks to contain fire and warmth. Every gesture was intentional. Every placement had a purpose. The cave was a womb of protection, a sanctuary where the terrors of the Ice Age could be held at bay, if only temporarily. But caves were not always available. In open plains or areas where glaciers had scoured the land bare, early humans had to construct their own shelters. Here, the resourcefulness of the species became apparent. Mammoth bones, with their immense size and durability, became structural supports. Skins and furs from hunted animals provided insulation, sewn together and stretched over the framework of bones or driftwood. Even snow and ice could be shaped into walls, creating semi-subterranean structures that trapped heat from the body and fire. These shelters were not merely functional. They were a testament to human creativity, a merging of necessity and intelligence that allowed life to persist where it otherwise might have perished. The process of building a shelter was itself a communal act. It required cooperation, skill, and coordination, often involving the entire group. Men, women, and even children contributed in ways suited to their abilities. Some dragged heavy bones, others arranged furs, while others maintained the fire that kept the hands and tools warm enough to work. The creation of a shelter was a shared labor, and within this shared labor, bonds were forged. Trust, communication, and mutual understanding were essential, for a misstep could weaken the structure and put everyone at risk. The act of building was not simply practical. It was social, emotional, and symbolic, a physical manifestation of the group's will to survive. Shelters also served as spaces for planning and strategy. Within the walls, early humans could store food, tools, and weapons, creating a base from which to launch hunts and expeditions. Hearths became the heart of these spaces, not only providing warmth, but also a gathering point for storytelling, teaching, and the sharing of knowledge. Around the fire, elders instructed the young on survival techniques, while hunters discussed the best strategies for approaching migrating herds. The shelter became a classroom, a council chamber, and a laboratory of experience. Every design decision, from the placement of bones to the angle of furs, reflected careful observation of the environment and its challenges. The psychology of shelter was as important as the physical construction. In the face of endless snow, blizzards, and the silent threat of predators, a safe space offered more than warmth. It offered reassurance, a sense of control in a world otherwise dominated by chaos. The very act of entering a shelter allowed humans to regulate fear, conserve energy, and recover from the harsh demands of the day. Inside, they could breathe more easily, sleep more soundly, and think more clearly. This psychological refuge was essential for maintaining social cohesion and planning survival strategies. Without it, the relentless stress of the environment could have led to breakdown, conflict, or despair. Over time, shelters evolved to incorporate lessons learned from trial and error. The placement of entrances to minimize wind exposure, the layering of furs for maximum insulation, and the use of fire in ways that maximized warmth while minimizing smoke inhalation all represented an early form of architecture. Humans began to experiment with semi-permanent dwellings, creating spaces that could be used season after season. Even in temporary shelters, attention to detail was critical. Insulation, ventilation, and structural integrity were all vital considerations. These early architectural insights were born of necessity, yet they laid the foundation for more complex constructions in the millennia to follow. Shelters were also deeply tied to memory and culture. The same caves that protected against the cold became canvases for expression. Walls were painted with images of animals, hunting scenes, and abstract symbols, testaments to human thought, creativity, and communication. These spaces held more than bodies. They held history. They were archives of survival, memory, and identity. In the quiet moments before sleep, the flickering firelight illuminated these images, connecting the living with the wisdom of those who had survived before. Shelter was no longer purely utilitarian. It became intertwined with the human psyche, embodying both protection and meaning. Even the most primitive shelters demonstrate a sophisticated understanding of environmental dynamics. Stone foundations resisted melting snow and shifting ice. Elevated platforms protected against ground dampness, and angled roofs allowed snow to slide off rather than collapse under weight. These strategies highlight early humans' observational skills and problem-solving abilities. The creatures of the Ice Age adapted instinctively to their environments, but humans adapted consciously, using knowledge, creativity, and foresight to modify the world around them. Shelter, in this sense, became an extension of human intelligence, a place where nature could be managed, if only partially, in favor of life. Finally, shelters were intimately connected to fire, the companion that transformed space into home. The careful placement of hearths maximized heat, illuminated interiors, and allowed smoke to escape without chilling the inhabitants. Fire and shelter together created a microclimate that defied the Ice Age. Within these constructed spaces, humans found more than warmth. They found the beginnings of civilization. They learned to organize, to cooperate, to plan, and to imagine a future beyond mere survival. Every stone, bone, and fur panel was a lesson in resilience, a tangible statement that life could persist even in the harshest conditions. In the end, shelter was a triumph of human ingenuity, patience, and willpower. It was both a physical necessity and a psychological anchor, bridging the gap between vulnerability and security. By crafting spaces that protected against the cold, early humans were doing more than surviving. They were asserting control over a world that sought to claim them. Every cave, hut, and bone-laden structure stood as proof that humanity could adapt, innovate, and endure. In the silent expanse of ice and snow, these shelters were islands of warmth, community, and hope, harboring the fragile flame of life against a frozen, indifferent world. As the sun dipped beneath the icy horizon, the world transformed into an endless canvas of shadow and cold. Darkness was not simply the absence of light. It was a tangible force, pressing against the walls of caves, slipping through cracks in shelters, and filling the spaces between humans with quiet menace. For early humans, nightfall brought more than cold. It brought the unknown. Predators, unseen and silent, prowled the frozen plains, and every gust of wind carried the possibility of danger. To survive, humans could not simply close their eyes and rest. They had to navigate the delicate balance between sleep and vigilance, between exhaustion and awareness. Sleep in the Ice Age was a ritual of both necessity and fear. The body demanded rest, yet the mind could not relinquish its vigilance entirely. Hunters, mothers, and elders developed systems of watchfulness, often sleeping in shifts, ensuring that someone was always alert to threats. Within the dim glow of the hearth or the flickering light of embers, humans huddled together, pressing close for warmth and safety. The act of sleeping became communal, a shared strategy where trust was literally a matter of life and death. Each sound, each movement was scrutinized, creating a heightened state of consciousness even in the moments of supposed rest. The architecture of sleep itself was a reflection of survival. Animal hides were layered to protect against the cold floor. Furs were wrapped tightly around bodies to conserve heat, and some groups even constructed raised platforms or mounds within caves to stay above moisture and draft. Fire played a critical role, not just for warmth, but for reassurance. The dancing light warded off fear, creating a psychological buffer against the oppressive darkness. These microenvironments of safety allowed humans to recuperate, dream, and plan, even as the wild world waited just beyond the walls of their fragile sanctuaries. Dreams in the Ice Age were shaped by this intimate relationship with survival. Anthropologists believe that the human brain processed the day's experiences, encoding strategies, hunting patterns, and environmental cues into memory during sleep. But dreams were not purely practical. In the flickering shadows, they may have conjured images of beasts, ancestors, and unknown forces, blending the tangible dangers of the day with the mysteries of the night. For a young child huddled in fur beside a sleeping parent, dreams could have been both frightening and instructive, offering rehearsals of life-or-death scenarios in a world where such skills were critical. The mind became a theater, projecting the struggles of the waking world into symbolic landscapes, where fear and hope intertwined. The fear of the dark also shaped social bonds. Close physical proximity in sleeping arrangements fostered communication, empathy, and trust. A mother's gentle touch, a sibling's breath, or the warmth of a companion became constant reminders that survival was shared. Humans learned to read subtle cues, the tension in a shoulder, a muffled grunt, or the faint rustle of furs. These signals were not merely comfort. They were warnings, alerts, and instructions. The shared experience of fear and sleep wove early humans into a tightly knit social fabric, where the survival of the individual was inseparable from the well-being of the group. Vigilance did not vanish entirely even in the deepest sleep. Some individuals maintained partial awareness, an evolutionary adaptation that allowed rapid response to threats. This hyperalert state may have been exhausting, but it was essential. The cold and darkness amplified every sense. The faint scent of a predator, the subtle vibration of footsteps on ice, or the sudden crack of a branch could mean life or death. Early humans relied on these instincts to survive the long nights, and in doing so, honed perceptual and cognitive abilities that would define the species for millennia to come. The cyclical nature of light and darkness also influenced mental and physical rhythms. Long winters meant extended nights, forcing humans to adjust sleep patterns, conserve energy, and regulate body temperature. Shorter, brighter days required rapid adaptation, hunting, gathering, and traveling in sync with environmental cues. This constant negotiation between rest and activity created a mental resilience, a capacity to endure uncertainty and danger with a calculated calm. In essence, sleep became a strategic resource, as critical as food, fire, or weapons. Fear itself was both enemy and teacher. The darkness revealed the fragility of life, but it also inspired caution, planning, and foresight. Humans learned to interpret environmental signals, the shimmer of ice indicating thin ground, the distant howl of wolves signaling nearby danger, or the patterns of snowfall predicting movement of prey. Every sound, shadow, and temperature shift became data, and over generations, these observations were encoded into the collective wisdom of the tribe. Fear transformed into intelligence. The threat of death became a catalyst for ingenuity. Even the rituals surrounding sleep carried symbolic weight. The quiet moments before closing eyes, the careful positioning of fire and hides, and the whispered reassurances between companions created a sense of order amid chaos. The long night was not simply endured, it was respected. Humans sat in silence before settling into rest, acknowledging the dangers outside, while drawing strength from each other and from the small circle of firelight. These nightly rituals were early forms of culture, blending survival tactics with emotion, memory, and meaning. In the Ice Age, the boundary between life and death was razor-thin. Sleep, dreams, and fear were inseparable from survival. The night tested humans in every way, physically, mentally, and socially. Yet through these trials, profound adaptations emerged. Humans developed acute perception, strategic thinking, and social cohesion. They learned to balance risk and recovery, vigilance and vulnerability. The long nights of the Ice Age, with all their terror and uncertainty, became crucibles of evolution, shaping the mind, body, and spirit in ways that continue to resonate in modern humans. By the time the dawn finally broke, painting the icy world in pale gold, early humans had endured more than another night. They had learned the rhythm of life itself. They rose, bodies stiff yet resilient, minds sharpened by vigilance and dreams, ready to face another day of hunting, gathering, and navigating the frozen wilderness. The long night was both adversary and teacher, a relentless force that demanded adaptation, courage, and cooperation. And within the fragile circle of light, warmth, and trust, humans discovered the profound truth. Survival was not merely enduring the cold. It was mastering the dance between fear and rest, between instinct and ingenuity, between life and the endless dark. In the frozen expanse of the Ice Age, survival was a contest not only of strength and endurance, but of ingenuity. The bitter cold, relentless predators, and scarcity of food demanded that early humans invent solutions where none existed. Tools became extensions of the body, amplifying the abilities of a species otherwise fragile in the face of such overwhelming forces. Stone, bone, and wood, materials often overlooked today, were transformed into instruments of survival. Each chip of flint, each sharpened bone, each carved stick represented not only creativity, but the stark determination to endure a world that seemed designed to annihilate them. Stone was the foundation of prehistoric technology. Early humans learned to strike carefully selected rocks against one another, producing sharp flakes capable of cutting, scraping, and piercing. These tools were essential for processing food, carving hides into clothing, and crafting spears to hunt the massive creatures that roamed the ice-covered plains. Flint, obsidian, and other hard stones were prized for their durability and sharpness, and the skill required to craft them was honed over years, often passed down from elder to youth. The process demanded patience and precision. A single misstrike could shatter a tool entirely. Yet these fragile objects held immense power. The power to transform humans from prey into predators, from fragile wanderers into masters of their immediate environment. Bone, too, became a vital resource. The skeletal remains of animals, carefully cleaned and carved, provided weapons, needles, and even primitive fishing hooks. A long, sturdy bone could serve as a spear shaft, while smaller fragments could be sharpened into points for hunting smaller game or for intricate work like sewing hides. Even antlers were not wasted. Their natural shape made excellent tools for digging, prying, or sculpting. The versatility of bone reflected the ingenuity of humans. Nothing was expendable, and every resource could serve multiple purposes. In the harsh Ice Age, efficiency was not a choice, it was survival. Wood, though often frozen and brittle, also played a crucial role. Early humans fashioned clubs, digging sticks, and spear shaft from branches and trunks, often shaping them carefully over fire to remove moisture and increase resilience. Wood was used to construct shelters, create sleds for transporting food, and even serve as handles for stone tools. Combining materials, stone tips with wooden shafts, bone needles with sinew thread. Early humans engineered hybrid tools that multiplied their effectiveness. This combination of observation, experimentation, and innovation demonstrated the emergence of abstract thinking, a hallmark of human intelligence. Firelight was intimately connected to tool-making. By softening wood over flames, early humans could bend or shape it with greater precision. Heat could harden spear tips or dry hides for use as rope and clothing. Fire also illuminated the night, allowing work to continue after sunset, extending the hours available for crafting essential implements. In this way, fire became both partner and facilitator, enabling humans to manipulate the raw materials of their environment with unprecedented skill. Tools and fire together created a feedback loop of survival. Each innovation allowed humans to better hunt, build, and endure, which in turn supported the continued refinement of tools. The creation and use of tools was also a deeply social activity. Knowledge of crafting techniques was shared around hearths and within caves, often through demonstration and imitation rather than spoken instruction. Young members observed elders shaping flint or carving bone, learning through repetition and careful attention. Mistakes were instructive. Success was celebrated, often silently, in the shared satisfaction of producing something useful. This transfer of skill reinforced social bonds and established the foundations of culture. Tools were more than practical items. They were vessels of memory, experience, and shared wisdom. Tools also influenced hunting strategies in profound ways. Spears and harpoons allowed humans to target larger, more dangerous animals with greater precision. Scrapers and knives enabled them to process hides quickly, creating clothing essential for warmth. Even small implements, such as needles or awls, had monumental importance, turning animal hides into wearable protection. Through these tools, humans could expand the range of their habitat, venture further from familiar shelters, and exploit resources that would have been impossible to use otherwise. The effectiveness of a group often depended on the ingenuity and quality of their implements, making tools a direct determinant of survival. The mental and psychological impact of tool-making was equally significant. The process fostered problem-solving skills, planning, and foresight. Early humans had to anticipate the needs of tomorrow, which tools would be required, which materials would last, and how to combine resources most effectively. Every successful creation reinforced confidence and agency, counteracting the fear imposed by the freezing, predatory world outside. Tools allowed humans not only to survive, but to assert control over their environment, turning passive observers into active participants in the shaping of their lives. Tools also acted as symbols of human ingenuity and status within small groups. Those skilled in crafting sharp spear points or durable knives may have been revered, their abilities recognized as essential to the safety and prosperity of the tribe. This recognition fostered cooperation, mentorship, and social hierarchy based on skill rather than brute strength. In the harsh Ice Age, intelligence and dexterity became as valuable as stamina or courage. The mastery of tools elevated humans above the animals they hunted, creating a subtle but profound distinction between species. Even in the smallest gestures, the artistry and intentionality of tool use is evident. Sharpening a flint blade, carefully aligning a bone point on a wooden shaft, or wrapping sinew with precision reflected a concentration and deliberation that was as much mental as physical. These acts were meditative in a way, transforming survival into a practice of skill, patience, and observation. They exemplified the human capacity to shape the world thoughtfully, rather than merely react to it. Each tool carried the imprint of human consciousness, turning raw nature into something purposeful. Ultimately, the tools of the Ice Age were not merely objects. They were extensions of the human mind. Stone, bone, and what became instruments of adaptation, communication, and survival. Fire amplified their potential, and social transmission ensured that knowledge endured across generations. Through these implements, early humans negotiated the demands of a frozen, hostile world, crafting lives that balanced fear with ingenuity, danger with strategy, and survival with innovation. In the glow of firelight, shaping a flint blade or carving a bone needle was more than work. It was a declaration of humanity, a statement that life could persist, thrive, and even flourish against the relentless odds of the Ice Age. The hunt in the Ice Age was far more than a pursuit of food. It was a crucible where skill, courage, and cooperation were tested against the harshest conditions imaginable. Across the frozen plains, massive herds of mammoths, reindeer, and woolly rhinoceroses roamed, their survival instincts honed over millennia. For early humans, bringing down such formidable prey required meticulous planning, ingenuity, and unwavering teamwork. Each hunt was a high-stakes gamble. Success meant nourishment, warmth, and survival. Failure could mean hunger, exposure, or death. The hunt was life and death intertwined, a ritual where every participant's actions could tip the balance toward survival or extinction. Preparation began long before the first footsteps on the snow. Hunters studied animal behavior, observing migration patterns, feeding habits, and vulnerabilities. They mapped the frozen terrain in their minds, noting the safest paths and the most advantageous positions for ambush. Decisions about when and where to strike were dictated by both instinct and experience. Younger hunters learned from elders, watching how spears were crafted, how traps were set, and how patience was exercised over hours or even days. Knowledge was accumulated, shared, and revered, for it was the difference between a successful hunt and a fatal mistake. The hunt itself was a choreography of precision and strategy. Hunters often worked in coordinated groups, encircling prey to drive it toward ambush points or natural hazards, such as cliffs, rivers, or snowdrifts. Some used simple decoys or noises to mislead animals, exploiting their predictable behaviors. Others relied on endurance, tracking a herd across miles of ice and snow until exhaustion forced the animal into vulnerability. Every movement, every signal, every step was deliberate. Silence was paramount, broken only by subtle gestures or murmured commands. The ability to communicate without alerting prey was as vital as physical strength or weapon skill. Weapons played a central role in these pursuits. Spears, often tipped with stone or hardened bone, allowed hunters to strike from a safer distance, while arrows and slings offered stealthy alternatives. Hunters understood the anatomy of their prey intimately, knowing where to pierce, how to immobilize, and how to maximize efficiency. Cutting tools were essential for butchering and processing meat quickly before it spoiled in the cold, and bones were repurposed for sleds, shelters, and clothing. Fire sometimes accompanied hunts, not as a direct tool of attack, but as a way to control environment, drive animals, or protect against other predators. The mastery of tools, combined with knowledge and coordination, turned these early humans into formidable hunters despite their physical fragility. The emotional dimension of the hunt was equally profound. Fear, excitement, and adrenaline intertwined in a heightened state of awareness. Each hunter's life depended not only on personal skill, but also on the reliability of companions. Trust was absolute. Hesitation or error could trigger catastrophe, not just for the individual, but for the entire group. Yet within this tension lay an extraordinary sense of brotherhood. The shared challenge of the hunt forged bonds that transcended ordinary social connections. Each success was celebrated collectively, and every narrow escape strengthened loyalty and interdependence. In the Ice Age, survival demanded that humans operate as a single organism, their coordination and trust finely tuned to the rhythms of prey and predator alike. Hunting large animals also demanded creativity and problem-solving. Ice, snow, and terrain were not merely obstacles, they were tools. Hunters manipulated landscapes, driving prey into narrow passes, natural traps, or deep snow where movement became difficult. They studied the behavior of predators, sometimes using wolves or scavengers to their advantage by tracking their movements or following their signs. Such strategies reveal not only intelligence, but also an extraordinary understanding of ecosystems. Early humans were observers as much as participants, integrating knowledge of animals, seasons, and weather into tactical decisions. Every hunt was an applied lesson in ecology, physics, and psychology, learned through necessity and experience. The aftermath of a hunt was as critical as the pursuit itself. Processing large animals required coordination and efficiency. Meat had to be butchered and preserved, hides removed and prepared, bones cracked and stored for future use. Fires were kept burning to warm the shelter and cook food, while children and elders often participated in less dangerous but essential tasks. The spoils of the hunt were shared equitably, ensuring the survival of the entire group. This ritual of distribution reinforced social bonds, established hierarchies based on skill and contribution, and emphasized collective survival over individual gain. Each hunt became a microcosm of the tribe's values, strategy, and culture. Hunting in the Ice Age was also a source of knowledge that transcended the immediate moment. Every expedition taught lessons about predator-prey relationships, the behavior of the environment, and the limitations of human endurance. Successes and failures were remembered, analyzed, and integrated into the group's collective wisdom. These lessons shaped migration patterns, shelter placement, and tool development. Over generations, the accumulated knowledge of countless hunts became a foundation for survival strategies that would endure for millennia. The hunt was more than sustenance. It was education, history, and preparation all rolled into one intense, dangerous experience. There was also a psychological transformation that occurred through repeated hunting. Early humans developed patience, discipline, and foresight. The hunt demanded constant observation, the ability to read subtle signs, and the capacity to delay gratification. It fostered a balance between instinct and calculation, courage and caution, aggression and restraint. These traits were essential not only for hunting, but for all aspects of survival in a harsh, unpredictable world. Through blood, ice, and exhaustion, humans were training themselves for the complex challenges of life, learning to navigate danger with skill and composure. Finally, the hunt reinforced a profound connection with the natural world. Humans became intimately attuned to animal behavior, the cycles of the seasons, and the nuances of the landscape. They learned to respect the power of the creatures they pursued and the fragility of life in general. The hunt was an act of survival, but it was also a lesson in humility, interdependence, and respect for the forces beyond their control. The Ice Age demanded more than strength. It demanded understanding, intelligence, and the courage to face both danger and mortality with unwavering resolve. In the frozen wilderness, the hunt was life distilled into its most elemental form: observation, strategy, cooperation, and endurance. It was where humans proved themselves, tested their limits, and strengthened the bonds that ensured the survival of the group. Blood was spilled, ice was traversed, and brotherhood was forged in the crucible of relentless pursuit. Every successful hunt was a triumph of intelligence over adversity, courage over fear, and unity over isolation. In this way, the Great Hunt shaped not only the physical survival of early humans, but the very essence of what it meant to be human: resourceful, cooperative, and endlessly adaptable in the face of a frozen, indifferent world. In the relentless grip of the Ice Age, warmth was survival. The bitter wind cut through exposed skin like knives. Frostbite could claim fingers and toes in minutes, and hypothermia lurked silently in the shadows. For early humans, clothing was far more than a cultural expression. It was a vital shield against a merciless environment. Unlike modern garments designed for fashion or comfort, every piece of hide, fur, or woven fiber was crafted with a single purpose: to preserve life. In the frozen wilderness, clothing was an extension of the body, a first line of defense against the icy world that threatened to consume them. The earliest clothing was simple but ingenious. Animal hides, stripped carefully from freshly hunted prey, were the foundation. Humans learned to clean, stretch, and treat these furs, softening them against the body while maintaining insulation. Bones or wooden awls were used to pierce thick hides, allowing sinew or plant fibers to stitch them together. Over time, patterns emerged: wraps, tunics, leggings, and even rudimentary gloves. Each innovation reflected both observation and experimentation, with humans learning how to layer, overlap, and shape materials to trap heat efficiently. In this sense, clothing was not just functional, but a product of intelligence, experience, and necessity. Fur selection was critical. Thick pelts from mammoths, reindeer, and other large Ice Age mammals offered superior insulation. Smaller animal hides, such as fox or hare, were often used for inner layers, providing softness and comfort against the skin. Humans learned to combine different furs strategically. Coarse outer layers blocked wind and moisture, while softer inner layers retained warmth. The layering principle, developed thousands of years before modern science would explain insulation, demonstrates the remarkable adaptive ingenuity of early humans. They understood, through trial and error, the mechanics of heat retention and the importance of protecting extremities. Sewing techniques evolve alongside these innovations. Bone needles and sinew thread allowed for tighter, more flexible construction. Humans discovered that piercing hides in certain patterns reduced tearing and increased durability. Each stitch was deliberate, designed to create garments that could endure harsh conditions, repeated use, and the strain of movement during hunting or migration. The process of crafting clothing was labor-intensive and often required the collective effort of the group. Young members might hold hides taut, elders might guide stitching techniques, and hunters would provide feedback on mobility and warmth. Clothing, in this way, became a shared achievement, binding communities together through necessity and skill. Footwear presented one of the greatest challenges. Frozen ground and sharp ice demanded protection, yet bulky shoes could hinder mobility during hunts or expeditions. Early humans experimented with wrapping fur around feet, using leather straps for secure fastening, and even stuffing footwear with grasses or moss for added insulation. These innovations allowed them to traverse miles of frozen tundra, cross rivers, and climb icy slopes with far less risk of injury or frostbite. The survival of a tribe often depended on the quality and functionality of their footwear, as mobility directly influenced access to food, shelter, and safety. The psychological impact of clothing cannot be overstated. Warmth was more than physical. It was comfort, security, and confidence. A well-insulated hunter could venture further, take calculated risks, and endure harsher conditions. Children and elders, wrapped in layers of fur, experienced a protective buffer that allowed them to conserve energy and maintain health. Clothing became a tangible reassurance against the unpredictability of nature, a symbol of mastery over a world otherwise dominated by cold, wind, and frost. Clothing also played a role in social organization. Skilled seamstresses or tailors who could craft effective garments may have held elevated status within a group. Expertise in selecting hides, treating them for durability, and designing functional clothing was essential, and knowledge was passed carefully from generation to generation. This transmission of skill reinforced community cohesion, as survival depended on maintaining competence in clothing production. Tribes who mastered clothing technology gained distinct advantages, able to inhabit regions that would have been fatal to less well-equipped groups. The use of clothing extended beyond survival into the realm of identity and symbolism. Patterns for combinations and decorative elements may have served to differentiate groups, denote status, or signal experience and skill. Even in the practical act of wrapping oneself in hides, there was room for expression, for subtle communication between members of the tribe. Clothing became both armor and language, a way to negotiate the physical environment while simultaneously reinforcing social structures. The evolution of clothing also mirrored broader technological developments. As tools improved, so did the complexity and functionality of garments. Sharper flint knives allowed for more precise cuts. Stronger needles enabled intricate stitching, and better knowledge of animal behavior ensured a more reliable supply of hides. Clothing, then, was not an isolated adaptation. It was part of a wider system of survival strategies, intertwined with hunting, shelter, and fire. It reflected the interconnectedness of early human life, where innovation in one domain amplified capabilities in another. In extreme cold, clothing became a form of insurance against death. A torn hide, an improperly insulated foot, or exposed skin could quickly lead to frostbite or hypothermia. Attention to detail was essential, as minor oversights could prove fatal. This meticulous approach to clothing illustrates the acute observational skills, foresight, and practical intelligence of Ice Age humans. They were constantly assessing, adjusting, and improving, demonstrating a continuous process of problem-solving in an unforgiving environment. Ultimately, the ingenuity behind Ice Age clothing demonstrates the profound adaptability of early humans. From hides and furs to sinew stitching and strategic layering, every innovation reflected the demands of a frozen world and the intelligence of a species learning to thrive against the odds. Clothing was survival, culture, and technology wrapped into one. It protected the body, reinforced community, and shaped the very possibility of life in the Ice Age. Wrapped in fur, guided by firelight, and armed with tools, humans carved out existence in a world that offered nothing but cold. And in doing so, they laid the foundations for all future civilizations. In the heart of the frozen wilderness, fire was more than warmth. It was life itself. The flickering flames of a carefully maintained hearth created islands of light and safety within the darkness of caves and shelters. Around these fires, early humans gathered not only to survive but to connect, to teach, and to imagine. The crackling embers illuminated faces, shadows danced along stone walls, and in that glow, the first seeds of culture began to take root. These firelight gatherings were as essential to survival as food, clothing, or shelter, forging bonds between individuals and creating the shared knowledge that would define humanity. The social function of fire was profound. By concentrating activity around a common hearth, humans created a central space for communication, collaboration, and planning. Elders could instruct the young, demonstrating hunting strategies, tool-making techniques, and lessons learned from past experiences. Within these circles, stories became repositories of survival wisdom. Tales of dangerous hunts, encounters with predators, and the lessons of seasons past were shared, sometimes in the form of words, other times through gestures, mimicry, or song. Each narrative reinforced practical knowledge, while also nurturing the imagination, a dual purpose essential for both immediate survival and long-term cognitive development. Storytelling around the fire also allowed early humans to process fear and danger collectively. The Ice Age was a world of constant threat. Blizzards, predators, and scarcity created unending tension. By sharing experiences aloud, individuals could externalize their anxieties, discuss potential threats, and reinforce communal strategies for coping. These gatherings turned fear into a social and educational tool, transforming individual vulnerability into collective strength. The act of narrating, listening, and responding cultivated empathy, understanding, and anticipation, skills crucial for survival in an unforgiving environment. Music and song were likely intertwined with storytelling. Even primitive instruments, rattles made of bones or hollowed wood, flutes carved from reeds or bones, would have complemented verbal tales. Rhythm, melody, and repetition helped memory retention, making it easier to recall crucial survival information. Songs may have recounted hunting strategies, migrations, or the life cycles of prey animals, embedding knowledge in a form that was both memorable and emotionally resonant. The shared act of producing sound further reinforced social cohesion, providing comfort, motivation, and a sense of identity within the tribe. Firelight gatherings also facilitated creativity and art. Cave walls near hearths were adorned with early paintings, handprints, and etched symbols. The interplay of light and shadow from the flickering flames may have inspired these visual expressions, adding a narrative dimension to hunting scenes or animal depictions. These images served multiple functions, recording experiences, educating younger generations, and perhaps even invoking spiritual or protective beliefs. Art, like stories and songs, became a vessel for memory, knowledge, and culture, ensuring that critical survival information transcended the immediate and was passed through generations. These gatherings were also deeply ritualistic. The repetition of storytelling, song, and artistic expression created patterns, marking the passage of time and the rhythm of communal life. Certain tales may have been told only on specific nights, after particular hunts, or during seasonal changes. Songs could have coincided with moon cycles or seasonal migrations, blending practical survival needs with emerging cultural structure. In this way, early humans were not merely surviving. They were beginning to shape the concept of shared identity and collective experience. Firelight became a temporal anchor, a nightly ceremony linking the present with memory, learning, and expectation. Children learned as much from observation as from direct instruction. Sitting close to the warmth of the hearth, they absorbed gestures, mimicked vocalizations, and internalized the emotional rhythms of stories and songs. This passive learning was crucial. It ensured that critical survival skills, social norms, and cultural knowledge were transmitted across generations without formal teaching methods. The firelight gatherings were laboratories of cognition, memory, and socialization, where young humans developed the abilities that would allow them to navigate a dangerous, ever-changing environment. The psychological impact of these gatherings was also profound. In a world dominated by cold, danger, and scarcity, the hearth provided a sense of stability and continuity. Humans experienced reassurance in proximity to others, in the warmth of the fire, and in the shared experience of stories and songs. The simple act of gathering created a buffer against despair, fatigue, and fear. It reinforced the notion that survival was a collective endeavor, and that humans could find safety and meaning even in a hostile landscape. Emotional resilience, in this sense, was as vital as physical strength or hunting skill. Firelight gatherings also fostered problem-solving and strategic thinking. Discussions around the hearth were not limited to narrative. They included practical planning. Which hunting grounds offered the best opportunities? Which shelters needed reinforcement? Which animals were approaching seasonal vulnerability? Through dialogue, humans tested hypotheses, shared observations, and debated strategies. The fire became a crucible for collaboration and innovation, a place where individual knowledge merged into group intelligence. Every story, song, and discussion enhanced the tribe's ability to anticipate, adapt, and endure. Even humor, teasing, and camaraderie likely played roles in these gatherings. Laughter, mimicry, and playful competition would have strengthened bonds and provided relief from the relentless pressures of survival. These moments of joy were not trivial. They reinforced social cohesion, trust, and morale, ensuring that humans could endure the psychological stresses of an unforgiving Ice Age environment. Emotional intelligence, cultivated around the fire, became another tool of survival, enhancing group coordination and resilience. Ultimately, firelight gatherings were at the heart of human adaptation. They blended warmth, nutrition, socialization, knowledge transfer, and creativity into a single, indispensable practice. Around the fire, humans transformed their experiences of fear, hunger, and cold into lessons, stories, songs, and art. They constructed culture as much as they constructed tools or shelters, understanding that survival required not only the body, but also the mind and spirit. In the flickering glow of firelight, humans discovered the power of shared experience, laying the foundations of storytelling, ritual, and the earliest forms of civilization itself. In the silent, frozen world beyond the cave, darkness and cold were constant. Within, the hearth glowed, casting warmth and light across faces and furs. Knowledge, memory, and community converged in this space, proving that the human spirit could not merely endure, it could flourish. Firelight gatherings were the nexus of survival and culture, transforming the most basic necessity into a profound act of connection, education, and creativity. It was here, in the quiet intimacy of flickering flames, that humans first began to define themselves, not merely as survivors of the Ice Age, but as thinkers, storytellers, and creators of meaning in a harsh and indifferent world. For early humans, the Ice Age was not just a backdrop for daily survival. It was a vast, shifting landscape that demanded constant movement. The frozen frontier was both a challenge and an opportunity, dictating where herds would roam, where water could be found, and where shelter was possible. Migration was not random wandering. It was a strategic response to environmental pressures, food scarcity, and seasonal changes. Every journey required foresight, planning, and endurance, and the success of these migrations often determined the survival of entire groups. Humans had to balance the immediate needs of warmth, food, and safety with long-term strategies for sustaining life across inhospitable terrain. The motivations for migration were intertwined with ecology. Large mammals, including mammoths, reindeer, and bison, moved in predictable patterns across the frozen plains, following vegetation and avoiding predators. Early humans, dependent on these herds for food, clothing, and tools, learned to track their movements with extraordinary precision. Knowledge of seasonal cycles, snow depth, river conditions, and wind patterns allowed humans to anticipate herd locations and plan journeys accordingly. Those who could predict migration routes gained a critical survival advantage, while those who misjudged the landscape risked hunger, exposure, and death. Migration was often a slow, deliberate process rather than a frantic rush. Families and clans moved in coordinated units, taking into account the needs of the young, the elderly, and the injured. Heavy hides, tools, weapons, and food stores had to be transported across ice, snow, and rocky terrain. Sleds or drag frames fashioned from wood and bone were sometimes employed to carry the heaviest loads. Every movement was calculated, minimizing energy expenditure while maximizing safety. The ability to endure long distances over frozen ground required not only physical stamina, but also intricate knowledge of the terrain and environmental hazards. The psychological demands of migration were as formidable as the physical ones. Traveling through endless white plains, exposed to blizzards and bitter winds, tested patience, courage, and group cohesion. Humans needed constant vigilance, watching for predators, navigating treacherous ice, and assessing weather changes that could threaten the entire group. Leadership and decision-making were critical. Disagreements over routes or timing could jeopardize survival. In these journeys, social cohesion and trust were paramount, as the actions of each individual had direct consequences for everyone. Survival demanded that humans operate as a unified entity, moving together with coordinated strategy and shared purpose. The journey itself offered lessons in environmental adaptation. Humans learned to exploit natural landmarks, such as rivers, valleys, and rock formations, as guides and protective barriers. They observed patterns in snow accumulation and wind direction to select optimal campsites, often finding microclimates that offered relative warmth or shelter. Seasonal indicators, such as the migration of birds or the growth of vegetation, informed decision-making. In this way, the landscape became both a teacher and a resource, shaping human cognition and reinforcing the intimate relationship between observation, planning, and survival. Hunting and foraging continued alongside migration. Early humans combined short-term tactics with long-term strategy, knowing that successful hunting along the route could sustain the group while preserving energy reserves for the journey ahead. Traps, ambushes, and coordinated drives were executed with precision, ensuring that even in movement, sustenance was available. Gathering edible plants, roots, and other resources supplemented the diet and provided critical nutrients. These practices required flexibility and ingenuity, as the availability of food could change drastically over relatively short distances. Migration, therefore, was not simply movement. It was a mobile ecosystem management strategy, integrating hunting, foraging, and observation. Shelter during migration presented unique challenges. Unlike semi-permanent caves or constructed huts, temporary encampments had to be quickly assembled and dismantled, often in exposed locations. Snow and ice were sometimes shaped into windbreaks, while furs and hides created insulated sleeping spaces. Fire remained essential, both for warmth and for cooking. The constant need to construct and deconstruct shelters honed early human skills in efficiency, adaptability, and improvisation. Every camp, no matter how temporary, was a calculated defense against cold, predators, and the elements. Children and the elderly were integral participants in migrations, not passive followers. While younger members carried lighter loads and observed techniques, elders provided guidance, knowledge of terrain, and oversight of safety measures. Their experience in predicting weather, identifying edible plants, and interpreting animal behavior was invaluable. Migration became a collaborative effort, where every member contributed according to ability, reinforcing social bonds and ensuring that knowledge was transmitted across generations. This dynamic strengthened community resilience and ensured continuity in skills and culture. Environmental hazards shaped every aspect of migration. Ice-covered rivers, hidden crevasses, sudden blizzards, and avalanches presented constant threats. Humans learned to assess risk, test ice before crossing, and find shelter quickly during storms. Predators also followed the herds, meaning that humans had to navigate not only the terrain, but also other dangerous creatures. These hazards reinforced vigilance, strategic thinking, and adaptive behavior. Mistakes could be catastrophic, yet careful observation and experience allowed humans to mitigate risks and traverse vast expanses successfully. Migration also fostered innovation and technological adaptation. Sledges, specialized footwear, improved clothing, and fire management techniques evolved to meet the demands of long-distance travel. Tools were optimized for transport and utility, and hunting strategies were adjusted for mobility. In this way, migration was a driving force behind human ingenuity, pushing communities to experiment, refine, and perfect survival methods under extreme conditions. Every mile traveled contributed to the expansion of knowledge, skill, and culture. Finally, migration shaped the human perception of space, time, and survival. The long journeys across frozen landscapes instilled patience, endurance, and foresight. Humans learned to anticipate seasons, navigate using natural landmarks, and predict the behavior of prey and predators alike. They experienced firsthand the interconnectedness of climate, terrain, and animal behavior, developing a holistic understanding of their environment. Migration was not simply movement. It was an immersive education, a continuous test of physical prowess, intelligence, and social cohesion. Through these epic journeys, early humans carved paths across the frozen world, connecting disparate habitats and following the rhythms of nature. Migration ensured access to vital resources, reinforced communal bonds, and stimulated innovation. Every trek across ice and snow was a testament to resilience, foresight, and the extraordinary adaptability of humans in the face of relentless environmental challenges. In the vast, unforgiving wilderness of the Ice Age, the journey itself became both a strategy for survival and a profound statement of human determination. The Ice Age was a world dominated by extremes, and humans shared it with creatures both magnificent and terrifying. The survival of early humans depended not only on hunting, but also on avoiding becoming prey themselves. Mammoths, saber-toothed cats, wolves, cave lions, and giant bears roamed the frozen plains, forests, and tundras, each species presenting unique challenges. To endure, humans needed acute perception, strategic thinking, and an understanding of animal behavior that rivaled that of their most dangerous predators. Life in this environment was a constant negotiation between opportunity and risk, a delicate dance where knowledge of the natural world was inseparable from survival. Predation pressures shaped early human behavior profoundly. Large carnivores were not only threats to individual hunters, but also potential devastators of entire camps. Saber-toothed cats, with their elongated canine teeth and powerful limbs, could attack swiftly and lethally, while wolves and cave lions often hunted in coordinated packs, displaying social intelligence that rivaled human groups. Humans learned to anticipate predator behavior, observing tracks, scat, and hunting patterns to predict the presence and movements of these animals. Awareness of predator territories influenced migration routes, hunting locations, and the positioning of shelters. Fear, in this sense, was not paralysis, it was data guiding decisions that ensured survival. Human strategy often involved preemptive measures. Fires served as deterrents, illuminating camps and creating barriers against nocturnal predators. Snares, traps, and thorny brush barriers were sometimes deployed to protect vulnerable members, particularly children and the elderly. Hunters carried weapons not only for capturing prey, but also for defense, understanding that the dual use of spears, clubs, and axes could tip the balance in moments of sudden danger. Even early warning systems, posting vigilant individuals or listening for subtle sounds of movement, became integral to survival. Life in the Ice Age demanded a constant interplay of observation, strategy, and quick response. Understanding prey was equally crucial. Large herbivores like mammoths, reindeer, and bison offered food, hides, and materials for tools, but capturing them was perilous. Humans had to study her behavior, migration patterns, and environmental responses, developing sophisticated tactics to isolate individuals and drive them toward traps or ambush points. The hunt was not brute force alone. It was coordination, patience, and psychological manipulation of animal instincts. By observing the nuances of prey movement, humans gained insight into patterns of life and death in the frozen ecosystem, learning to exploit opportunities without overextending themselves. Small prey, such as rabbits, birds, and fish, required different techniques. Nets, snares, and primitive fishing implements were crafted with precision, while stealth and timing became essential. Even insects and plant-based protein could supplement diets when larger prey was scarce. These practices demonstrate the versatility of early humans, who could adapt hunting and foraging strategies to a range of ecological niches. Understanding the diversity of available food sources was key to maintaining energy and health, especially during harsh winters when large game was harder to track. Social dynamics among humans were shaped by predator-prey relationships. Hunters relied on coordinated strategies, often communicating silently or with minimal cues to avoid alarming prey or attracting predators. Groups developed roles based on skill and experience. Some scouted terrain, others drove animals toward ambushes, while others remained on alert for threats. Such organization required trust, discipline, and the capacity to anticipate both animal and human behavior. The constant presence of danger fostered cohesion, mutual reliance, and a sharpening of cognitive and social skills that were essential for survival. Predation also influenced shelter construction. Caves, overhangs, and temporary structures were chosen not only for warmth, but also for defensibility. Natural barriers, high ground, and narrow entrances provided safety against predators, while the use of fire further enhanced protection. Sleeping arrangements were carefully planned, with the most vulnerable positioned closest to heat sources and the center of the group. Knowledge of predator habits informed these choices, creating a layered system of defense that combined spatial awareness, social organization, and technological ingenuity. Observation of predators and prey alike provided critical learning opportunities. Humans studied hunting patterns of wolves, learning how packs coordinated movements and ambushed prey. They observed lions and bears, understanding stalking behaviors, territoriality, and feeding habits. This intimate knowledge of animal behavior was not merely academic. It directly informed human strategies for hunting, defense, and migration. Over time, humans developed a form of ecological intelligence, recognizing the interdependencies between species, the rhythms of life and death, and the ways in which environmental conditions influence behavior. Firelight gatherings often reinforce this knowledge. Stories of predator encounters, successful hunts, and close calls were recounted, emphasizing lessons and strategies. These narratives transmitted practical survival information while also cultivating vigilance and respect for the natural world. Early humans understood that fear, observation, and experience had to be codified into memory and shared across generations. In this way, predators and prey became teachers, shaping not only physical survival but also cognitive and cultural development. Predator-prey dynamics also influenced psychological resilience. Constant awareness of danger fostered vigilance, quick decision-making, and the ability to manage stress under pressure. Humans develop patience and adaptability, learning to weigh risks against potential rewards. The omnipresence of predators reinforced humility and respect, ensuring that survival required not only strength but intelligence and cooperation. Fear became a tool, guiding careful action, enhancing perception, and fostering strategic planning. The Ice Age fauna also shaped technological innovation. Weapons, traps, and defensive structures evolved to counter threats and exploit opportunities. Spear tips, bow, and arrow innovations and defensive tools reflected the need to interact effectively with both prey and predator. Humans learned to manipulate terrain, employ group tactics, and anticipate animal behavior in ways that demonstrated extraordinary cognitive flexibility. These adaptations not only secured sustenance, but also reinforced the broader survival skills that would define humanity for millennia. Ultimately, navigating the Ice Age fauna was a constant negotiation between risk and reward. Every day presented decisions that balanced the pursuit of food against the threat of death. Humans learned to read the landscape, understand animal behavior, and coordinate socially to survive. Predators taught caution and respect. Prey taught patience, observation, and ingenuity. Through these interactions, early humans honed the skills, strategies, and psychological resilience that allowed them not just to endure, but to thrive in a world where every moment was a contest of life and death. In the frozen wilderness, humans were neither the strongest nor the fastest, but they were adaptive, observant, and innovative. By understanding the patterns of predator and prey, they transformed survival into a strategic endeavor. This intimate relationship with Ice Age fauna shaped early human behavior, cognition, and social organization, leaving a legacy of intelligence, resilience, and cooperation that continues to define the species to this day. In the unforgiving expanse of the Ice Age, shelter was a lifeline, a buffer against wind, snow, and sub-zero temperatures. The harsh environment demanded ingenuity, as exposure could quickly lead to frostbite, hypothermia, or death. Early humans learned to transform the raw materials around them, rock, wood, ice, and animal hides, into protective structures that were not merely functional but essential for survival. Shelters provided safety from predators, warmth against the relentless cold, and a space for social interaction, planning, and rest. In essence, they were both refuge and laboratory, where the human mind tested strategies, refined tools, and fostered communal bonds. Natural formations, such as caves and rock overhangs, were prime locations for shelter. These structures offered immediate protection from wind and precipitation, and their thermal properties retained heat from fires and bodies more efficiently than open ground. Caves often became central hubs for daily life, hosting sleeping areas, communal hearths, and storage spaces. Evidence suggests that some caves were repeatedly occupied for generations, indicating that early humans recognized and exploited their strategic advantages. These natural shelters were more than convenience. They were a lifeline in a world dominated by extreme weather and relentless predators. When natural shelters were unavailable or inadequate, humans constructed temporary or semi-permanent huts. Frameworks were often made from wood, reinforced with animal bones or antlers, and covered with hides or foliage for insulation. The process required careful planning. Supports needed to bear weight, coverings had to repel wind and snow, and entrances were designed to minimize heat loss while providing access. These shelters varied in size and complexity depending on group size, local resources, and climatic severity. Even the simplest hut reflected an understanding of physics, material properties, and environmental dynamics, demonstrating the ingenuity of early humans under pressure. Snow and ice were also employed as building materials, particularly in treeless tundras. Humans learned to sculpt snowdrifts into windbreaks, trenches, and igloo-like domes. Packed snow provided surprisingly effective insulation, and the dome shape minimized surface area exposed to wind while maximizing interior warmth. These constructions were temporary yet highly functional, allowing groups to survive sudden blizzards or extreme cold snaps during migrations. The ability to adapt construction techniques to available materials illustrates the resourcefulness of Ice Age humans, who used both observation and experience to create life-sustaining structures in hostile conditions. Inside shelters, fire played a critical role. Hearths not only provided warmth, but also served as focal points for cooking, tool maintenance, and social activity. The placement of the hearth was deliberate, often central to maximize heat distribution and minimize smoke accumulation. Stones or clay may have been used to line hearths, retaining and radiating warmth. The combination of fire and shelter created a microclimate, a controlled environment where humans could conserve energy, recover from exertion, and plan for future survival. This interplay of natural and constructed elements reflects a sophisticated understanding of thermodynamics long before formal science existed. Shelters were also sites of social cohesion. Within their walls, early humans gathered to eat, share stories, teach skills, and engage in rituals. The physical space of the shelter reinforced social structures, as placement near the fire or the use of particular areas could reflect status, experience, or role within the group. Safety inside, these structures allowed for moments of rest, reflection, and community building that were impossible in the exposed landscape. The design of living spaces, therefore, was not merely practical. It was intimately connected to social organization, communication, and cultural continuity. Adaptation to extreme weather influenced construction techniques over time. Strong winds required low-profile structures. Heavy snowfall demanded reinforced roofs, and bitter cold necessitated multiple insulation layers. Humans learned to combine materials creatively. Wood frameworks could be overlaid with thick hides, snow walls could be reinforced with wooden poles, and natural depressions in the ground provided additional protection. This trial-and-error process, refined over generations, resulted in increasingly effective shelters that balanced mobility, durability, and protection. Every improvement enhanced survival odds and demonstrated an iterative approach to problem-solving in a harsh environment. The location of shelters was as important as their construction. Proximity to water, food sources, and hunting grounds determined where humans established temporary or permanent camps. Elevation, wind direction, and sun exposure were carefully assessed to maximize warmth and minimize exposure to storms. Shelters were often positioned strategically to monitor predator activity and provide early warning of danger. Site selection combined ecological understanding with tactical thinking, ensuring that each choice contributed to both immediate and long-term survival. Children and the elderly were central considerations in shelter design. Sleeping arrangements prioritized warmth and safety, often placing the most vulnerable at the center of sleeping areas or near the hearth. Shelter design accounted for the need to move, cook, and maintain tools without endangering group members. This attention to human factors reflects early recognition of ergonomics, even if not formalized, and demonstrates the holistic thinking necessary for enduring in the Ice Age. Beyond immediate survival, shelters fostered innovation and experimentation. Early humans refined construction methods, tested materials, and shared knowledge across generations. The challenges of building in snow, ice, and wind spurred creativity, leading to diverse solutions adapted to local conditions. This cumulative knowledge enhanced not only safety, but also the development of culture, as shelters became sites of learning, collaboration, and ritual. The act of constructing, inhabiting, and refining shelters was both practical and transformative, shaping cognition and social organization. Ultimately, shelters in the Ice Age were more than physical spaces. They were lifelines, laboratories, and social arenas. Whether carved into rock, assembled from wood and hides, or sculpted from snow and ice, these structures embodied human ingenuity, adaptability, and foresight. They turned the hostile landscape into a manageable environment, providing warmth, protection, and a foundation for culture. In the endless storms and freezing nights, shelters allowed humans not only to survive but to flourish, creating spaces where knowledge, creativity, and community could endure against the relentless forces of nature. In the harsh and unpredictable world of the Ice Age, survival was not merely a physical endeavor. It was also deeply psychological and spiritual. Early humans faced daily uncertainty, Blizzards could strike without warning, hunts could fail, and predators lurked in every shadow. To cope with this unpredictability, humans developed rituals, beliefs, and practices that infuse their lives with structure, meaning, and a sense of control. These early spiritual frameworks were closely intertwined with survival, providing guidance, reinforcing social cohesion, and shaping the ways humans interpreted the natural world. Rituals often began with observation of the environment. Humans noticed patterns in the movements of animals, changes in weather, or celestial phenomena like the phases of the moon and the position of the sun. Certain behaviors were interpreted as omens. An unusual migration pattern might signal scarcity. A predatory attack could be seen as a warning, and seasonal changes were markers for migration or hunting. These observations became ritualized into practices that combined superstition with practical wisdom. For example, specific hunting preparations or the timing of migrations were often linked to ceremonial acts, blending survival strategy with spiritual observance. The use of symbols and art played a central role in early spirituality. Cave paintings, engravings, and carvings depicted animals, hunting scenes, and abstract symbols, often near hearths or deep within caves. These images may have served multiple functions: as educational tools, as a means to invoke luck or protection in hunts, or as expressions of reverence for powerful forces in nature. The act of creating these symbols was itself ritualistic, requiring concentration, cooperation, and intent. Through these early artistic practices, humans connected tangible survival activities with intangible beliefs, reinforcing the psychological and social dimensions of existence. Fire, central to daily life, also held spiritual significance. Beyond warmth and cooking, fire was a focal point for rituals and ceremonies. Lighting a fire could be accompanied by chants, gestures, or offerings, symbolizing control over nature's chaos. Fires in shelters or open campsites became sacred spaces, where communities gathered to perform rites that honored the elements, ancestors, or animal spirits. These rituals provided structure to otherwise chaotic lives, transforming the act of survival into a practice imbued with meaning and reinforcing the bonds between individuals and the larger world around them. Animal spirits likely played a critical role in early belief systems. Humans observed the strength, behavior, and patterns of animals and attributed symbolic significance to them. The mammoth, saber-toothed cat, or reindeer was not only food, but also a symbol of power, resilience, and danger. Rituals might include mimicking animal movements, offering parts of the kill in reverence, or performing dances to ensure future hunting success. By acknowledging the power of animals in spiritual terms, humans reinforced respect for prey and predators alike, creating ethical and psychological frameworks that guided behavior and interaction with the natural world. Rituals were also deeply social. Collective ceremonies, whether for hunting success, seasonal change, or mourning the dead, strengthened group cohesion. Shared practices fostered trust, coordination, and a sense of identity, ensuring that members felt part of a larger, meaningful structure. These communal acts were essential for survival, as cohesion directly influenced hunting efficiency, defense against predators, and the transmission of knowledge. Participation in rituals reinforced social roles, allowed for the expression of hierarchy, and provided opportunities for younger members to learn critical survival practices under the guidance of elders. Omens and divination were closely linked to survival strategies. Observing clouds, wind direction, animal behavior, or even the outcome of small daily events allowed humans to make predictions about future conditions. Certain signs were considered auspicious, others dangerous, guiding decisions about when to hunt, move camp, or avoid particular areas. This reliance on environmental cues transformed ritual into a form of practical intelligence, blending the spiritual with the tactical. It illustrates that early humans were not purely reactive but engaged in sophisticated anticipation and planning, guided by both observation and belief. Rituals around death and the deceased also emerge in archaeological evidence. Burials, the placement of tools or ornaments, and even cave art may have reflected a belief in the continuity of life beyond death. Caring for the dead, honoring ancestors, and maintaining sacred spaces reinforced group identity and transmitted moral and ethical norms. These practices suggest that humans were acutely aware of mortality, using ritual and spirituality to confront the fragility of life while reinforcing the value of collective survival. The psychological impact of rituals cannot be overstated. Repetition, symbolism, and ceremony provided a sense of stability in an unpredictable world. They reduced anxiety, reinforced group cohesion, and imbued daily survival activities with purpose. By externalizing fear and uncertainty through structured acts, humans could channel energy toward productive and coordinated action rather than paralysis or panic. Rituals thus functioned as both coping mechanism and social glue, enhancing resilience at both individual and group levels. Rituals also influenced innovation. Observing nature for omens led to deeper understanding of weather patterns, animal behavior, and environmental cycles. Spiritual frameworks encouraged experimentation with tools, fire management, and clothing to appease or honor natural forces. In this way, belief systems were not static but dynamic, integrated with observation, learning, and adaptation. Early spirituality was both imaginative and practical, linking survival with meaning, observation with creativity, and individual cognition with collective wisdom. Ultimately, the rituals of the Ice Age were more than superstition. They were essential survival mechanisms. By creating structured practices around hunting, migration, weather, and social life, humans developed resilience, foresight, and cohesion. Firelight gatherings, artistic expression, animal reverence, and communal ceremonies transformed the harsh landscape into a comprehensible and navigable world. In the midst of ice, snow, and uncertainty, rituals provided continuity, control, and connection, shaping not only how humans survived, but also how they understood themselves and their place in a vast and often indifferent world. Through these early spiritual practices, humans forged a sense of identity and purpose that complemented physical survival. Belief, observation, and ritual became intertwined, creating a framework for life in which meaning and strategy coexisted. The Ice Age was not only a test of endurance, but also a crucible for the mind, spirit, and culture, revealing that survival was as much about cognition, social bonds, and ritual as it was about fire, clothing, or shelter. In the frozen wilderness of the Ice Age, survival demanded not only strength and resilience, but also ingenuity. Humans were not the fastest or the strongest creatures in their environment, yet their capacity to manipulate materials into tools gave them a decisive advantage. Stone, bone, antler, and wood became extensions of the body, allowing humans to hunt, process food, construct shelters, and defend against predators. Every tool reflected observation, experimentation, and problem-solving, transforming raw materials into instruments of survival. The development and refinement of tools exemplified the intersection of necessity, creativity, and intelligence, forming a cornerstone of early human adaptation. Stone tools were among the earliest and most versatile implements. Flint, chert, obsidian, and other hard stones were carefully selected for their durability and capacity to hold a sharp edge. Through percussion and pressure flaking, humans shaped blades, scrapers, and points that could cut, carve, and pierce. These tools were multifunctional. A single flint knife might be used to butcher animals, prepare hides, or craft other implements. The precision required to strike stones in specific ways demonstrates both fine motor skill and cognitive planning, indicating that early humans engaged in complex thought processes far beyond mere survival instinct. Bone and antler tools complemented stone implements, offering flexibility, strength, and resilience in ways stone alone could not provide. Bones from prey animals were fashioned into needles, awls, spear points, and harpoons, allowing humans to sew hides, fish, and hunt with increased efficiency. Antlers, with their natural curvature and toughness, became ideal for handles, digging implements, or thrusting tools. These materials required careful preparation, cleaning, curing, and shaping, reflecting deep understanding of their properties and limitations. The integration of multiple materials into cohesive toolkits reveals a level of technological sophistication that allowed humans to thrive in harsh and unpredictable conditions. Wood was equally vital, though more perishable and less preserved in the archaeological record. Early humans shaped wooden shafts for spears, digging sticks, and sled frames, often combining them with stone or bone tips. Fire-hardened wood increased durability, and carved grooves or lashings enabled secure attachments. Wooden tools demonstrate forward thinking, as their maintenance, replacement, and adaptation were essential for sustained survival. The creation of complex tools from multiple materials shows that humans were capable of planning several steps ahead, anticipating needs, and engineering solutions tailored to specific environmental challenges. The invention of composite tools marked a revolutionary leap in early human technology. By combining stone, bone, and wood into integrated implements, humans amplified their capabilities. Spears with sharpened stone tips allowed safer hunting of large, dangerous prey, while outladdles, spear throwers, extended range and force, reducing risk and improving success rates. Harpoons and fishing tools enabled access to aquatic resources previously unavailable. Each innovation reflected careful observation, trial and error, and iterative refinement, demonstrating that Ice Age humans were experimental, adaptable, and remarkably intelligent problem solvers. Tool use was closely tied to social learning. Knowledge of tool making was transmitted through imitation, demonstration, and mentorship, often during firelight gatherings or while preparing shelters. Young members observed elders, copying movements and techniques until mastery was achieved. This transmission of skill reinforced group cohesion, ensured survival competence, and facilitated innovation. The communal aspect of tool-making illustrates that early humans thrived not only because of individual ingenuity, but also because of collective learning and shared expertise. Tools also shaped hunting strategies. Stone-tipped spears, bone knives, and wooden traps allowed humans to approach dangerous prey with greater confidence and safety. Coordinated hunting required communication, timing, and skillful use of tools, often involving multiple participants executing complex plans. The ability to manipulate tools effectively transformed humans from passive observers of nature into active participants, capable of influencing animal behavior and exploiting environmental opportunities. Hunting became both a physical and cognitive exercise, integrating technology, observation, and social coordination. Beyond hunting, tools facilitated food processing and preservation. Scrapers prepared hides for clothing and shelter, while cutting tools allowed butchering of meat and removal of marrow, a critical source of calories during winter months. Grinding stones and rudimentary storage containers enabled humans to process seeds, roots, and other plant materials, increasing dietary diversity and nutritional stability. Tools became central to the transformation of raw resources into usable, life-sustaining products, extending survival through ingenuity and efficiency. Tool-making also stimulated cognitive development. The process required problem-solving, planning, and spatial awareness, fostering abstract thought and fine motor control. Recognizing patterns in materials, predicting outcomes of specific strikes, and improvising when tools failed enhanced intelligence and creativity. This iterative learning loop, observation, experimentation, adjustment, was fundamental to human evolution, demonstrating that technology was as much a mental exercise as a physical one. Fire, clothing, shelter, and social cohesion were all intertwined with tool use. Sharpened stones made firewood processing easier. Bone needles facilitated stitching of hides for clothing, and tools helped shape shelters. The integration of these elements illustrates that early human life was a complex system of interdependent technologies, behaviors, and social practices. Tools were not isolated inventions. They were threads in a broader survival strategy, enabling humans to manipulate their environment, overcome limitations, and flourish despite extreme conditions. Ultimately, tools were extensions of human intelligence. Stone, bone, and wood became instruments that bridged the gap between vulnerability and mastery, allowing early humans to hunt effectively, protect themselves, construct shelters, and navigate the Ice Age landscape with confidence. Each tool embodied observation, experimentation, and foresight, reflecting the extraordinary ingenuity of humans faced with relentless environmental challenges. Through these innovations, Ice Age humans transformed their surroundings from a world of uncertainty into one they could understand, manipulate, and survive within, laying the foundation for all future technological advancements. In the unforgiving cold of the Ice Age, securing food was not merely a daily task. It was a complex, calculated endeavor that dictated life or death. Winters were particularly perilous, as heavy snow, frozen rivers, and sparse vegetation limited access to edible resources. Early humans developed sophisticated strategies to hunt, gather, and store food, balancing immediate caloric needs with long-term survival. Their understanding of animal behavior, plant cycles, and environmental patterns allowed them to endure scarcity, transform challenges into opportunities, and create a resilient subsistence system that could withstand even the harshest conditions. Hunting was the cornerstone of winter survival. Large mammals such as mammoths, bison, reindeer, and elk provided essential calories, clothing, and materials for tools and shelter. Success depended on preparation, cooperation, and adaptability. Humans studied migration patterns, herd behaviors, and predator activity to plan hunts with precision. Strategies ranged from ambushes to drives, where groups would carefully guide animals into natural traps, cliffs, or confined areas. The coordination required for such hunts demanded social cohesion, clear communication, and meticulous planning, often spanning days or even weeks of observation before the first strike. Weapons and tools were integral to hunting success. Stone-tipped spears, atlatls, and bone harpoons allowed humans to attack from a safer distance, minimizing risk from powerful prey. Traps, snares, and pitfall constructions captured smaller animals, while nets and hooks enabled fishing and small game harvesting. Every implement reflected careful observation of prey anatomy, behavior, and environmental conditions. The development and refinement of these tools were iterative, driven by trial and error, and honed over generations. Humans adapted their technology to seasonal conditions, terrain, and the specific challenges posed by each species, demonstrating remarkable ingenuity and resilience. Gathering complemented hunting, providing essential vitamins, minerals, and carbohydrates often unavailable from meat alone. Roots, tubers, nuts, berries, and edible shoots were collected, stored, and sometimes processed to increase digestibility. Even in winter, early humans identified microhabitats, sunny slopes, shelter depressions, or under snow cover, where plant life persisted. This knowledge was accumulated through observation, experimentation, and oral transmission, forming a critical part of the survival toolkit. By combining hunting and gathering, humans diversified their diet and mitigated the risk of famine, ensuring energy and nutrient balance even during extended periods of scarcity. Storage techniques were vital for bridging gaps between abundance and scarcity. Early humans preserved meat by drying, smoking, or freezing, while edible plants were cached in insulated pits, containers, or snow-covered sites. This forward-thinking approach allowed them to endure long winters when fresh resources were scarce. Storage also facilitated social and cultural practices, enabling communal feasts or the distribution of surplus food to vulnerable members, reinforcing social bonds and group cohesion. The ability to anticipate scarcity and implement preservation strategies marked a significant cognitive leap, blending observation, planning, and innovation into a single survival strategy. Food acquisition also influenced movement and settlement patterns. Humans migrated following prey, seasonal vegetation, and water sources, selecting campsites that balanced accessibility with safety. Winter encampments were often near predictable food sources, minimizing energy expenditure while maximizing yield. Mobility required careful consideration of resource availability, shelter construction, and environmental hazards. Every decision, from the timing of movement to the choice of campsite, was intertwined with food strategy, reflecting a sophisticated understanding of the relationship between survival and spatial temporal patterns in the environment. The social dimension of food acquisition was equally critical. Hunting and gathering were often collaborative efforts, with clear roles and responsibilities. Some individuals scouted, others drove prey, while skilled hunters executed the kill. Foraging teams distributed labor according to ability, ensuring efficiency and minimizing risk. This coordination reinforced social hierarchies, cooperation, and knowledge transmission. Children learned by observation and participation, absorbing techniques and strategies that would sustain them throughout their lives. Food, in this sense, was not only sustenance, but also a medium for education, social bonding, and cultural continuity. The psychological stakes of winter food scarcity were high. Hunger, fatigue, and stress threatened both individual performance and group cohesion. Humans developed strategies to manage these pressures, including ritualized preparation of food, communal sharing, and symbolic acts designed to attract luck or ensure success. Firelight gatherings often included planning, storytelling, and the allocation of resources, transforming meals into both practical and symbolic acts. By integrating cognition, emotion, and social interaction, humans reduced the anxiety associated with scarcity and reinforced a shared sense of purpose and resilience. Risk management was central to winter food strategies. Overhunting could deplete local resources, while miscalculating prey availability could leave a group stranded without sustenance. Humans learned to balance short-term needs with long-term sustainability, adjusting hunting intensity, gathering effort, and migration patterns. Observation of animal behavior, weather, and environmental signals informed these decisions, allowing humans to anticipate shortages and implement mitigation strategies. In this way, survival became a dynamic process of adaptation, prediction, and careful decision-making. Food also played a symbolic and ritualistic role. Certain hunts or foraging successes were celebrated, accompanied by storytelling, dance, or offerings to ensure future abundance. These practices reinforced cultural identity, social hierarchy, and group cohesion. They transformed survival from a purely mechanical act into a shared cultural experience, blending nutrition, sociality, and meaning. The integration of ritual with practical necessity highlights the multidimensional nature of Ice Age life, where survival, culture, and psychology were inseparable. Ultimately, winter food strategies reflect a profound understanding of ecology, behavior, and social organization. Hunting, gathering, preservation, and strategic migration were interconnected components of a resilient survival system. Humans leveraged observation, experimentation, and collaboration to secure sustenance, navigate scarcity, and sustain community life. Their success lay not only in physical strength or tool use, but in intelligence, planning, and adaptability, allowing them to endure extreme cold, fluctuating resources, and relentless environmental challenges. Through these practices, early humans transformed the Ice Age landscape from a threat into a managed resource. Food acquisition became an arena of learning, innovation, and social reinforcement. Each meal, whether the result of a successful hunt or careful foraging, symbolized a triumph of ingenuity, cooperation, and resilience. In the frozen wilderness, the pursuit of nourishment was a testament to the human capacity for foresight, adaptation, and survival in the face of relentless adversity.